Check, 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 check. Hello and welcome back to the No Names, No Numbers podcast. I'm your host, Pat LaBelle. We have a very, did I say very? Special guest in studio today, the one and only Ian Dartley.
Hello, hello.
Everybody, welcome Ian to the show. Yay! Go Ian! So, Ian is our resident film guy, and today we're going to be talking about movies, the film industry, and just lots of good stuff. So, I guess how about to start off, Ian, what's your experience and background with film, production, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so I think my first real introduction to getting into film was in my senior year of high school when I took a literature and film class. And some of the older films our teacher showed us just really kind of caught me. And I kind of went on my own and started watching a few more lesser known films that had come out recently. I think the first specific movie that I watched that wasn't one of the main tentpole movies was Ingrid Goes West, kind of like a psychological type thriller with Aubrey Plaza and Ice Cube's son. I'm blanking on his O'Shea Jackson. Yeah. And then kind of after that, I was just it exploded. I started watching a lot more, and I found myself posting on my Instagram about a lot of my opinions. And I didn't know if my followers cared, and I didn't really care whether they cared. But at some point, I was like, I should just start a separate Instagram account for this. So I started a film review account, and it's not crazy popular, but it's definitely been steadily growing in terms of the amount of followers and the engagement I have. And it's nice having a sort of small group of people that consistently responds to my posts and messages me about it. And so yeah, that's definitely one of the main parts of my film experience. In terms of production, I've only put together 2 short films, and they're awful. I'm not going to tell you the names because I don't want you to watch them. Production is definitely not my forte, though I have been trying to learn more about that. I do a lot of screenwriting on my free time. I have a folder on my Google Drive with a number of scripts and outlines that I've done. I think I've only actually finished one of them. Every single time I try to finish one of them, I start getting different ideas on what I could do different. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely I can relate to that.
Yeah.
But I guess jumping off that, what would you say as of now is your favorite part of the process? The writing, the shooting,
visualizing what I want to shoot. Definitely, I love that. I love getting together an outline, a very loose outline, and just putting together the pieces of what's going to come in between the beginning and the end. Because when I'm writing something, I feel like it's best to start out with the beginning and the end. You have to have the 2 main bookmarks of a story before you really fill in what's going to happen. And there have been examples of films that start shooting without scripts that don't exactly end well. One of the main examples was Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. During the writer's strike. Yeah. During the writer's strike, they started shooting action scenes with no actual script finished yet, and we all know how that movie turned out. I mean, 10-year-old me thought it was amazing. But,
that's what really matters, right?
Yeah.
So when you made those 2 short films, I acted in another student film, so I kind of know how the process is with scrapping everything together. What would you say is the biggest challenge when you're a student, you don't have the $1 billion budget per se?
Well,
what do you think?
The first one I made, which you must know, it's called It Came Out of the Sky. It's on YouTube. Iconic. Must watch. So the most challenging part of that was just getting together my friends to actually shoot it, because I think I wrote it within 2 or 3 days. It was kind of just on a whim. I want to make this. I want to get something out there with my name on it, even if it's not good. And I didn't actually try to find any professional actors. I just used a few of my friends that lived in my dorm building at the time, and I love them. They did a solid job, but I will definitely be looking for people with more acting experience next time around, and hopefully I have more solid directing experience so I can actually direct better, because I think the poorest part about that movie was the actual direction, because I rented out a camera from the library, a very textbook Sony camera. I'm blanking on the name of it, but it kept on dying during the shoot, so we had to like pause, charge the battery, and get back to it. And what should have only taken like an hour and a half, because this was like a 6 or 7 minute movie, took like 3 hours, and my friends were just dead by the end of it, and probably a little pissed at me for making them shoot for so long. So I'd say the actual shooting process was just really frustrating.
Would you say it was like Living in Oblivion-esque?
Oh god.
Or like independent filmmaker, what can go wrong will go wrong?
Definitely not as bad as Living in Oblivion,
Yeah.
but that movie made a lot more sense after I had gone through that shoot. I definitely can imagine that if I ever do something more expansive in terms of shooting, that there's going to be way more problems, so can't wait for that.
But yeah, definitely big props to you for just like jumping in and trying it. I always feel like that's the hardest thing.
Yeah, with a lot of hobbies in general, that's the best way to approach it. But you really just got to kind of grab it and like jump into it. Like you can't just think. You can't just. I'm trying to think how to word this, but you can't have doubt about what you're shooting or writing. You kind of just, as the main character in Parasite says, you kind of just have to slash through it like it's a forest, and you're just slashing through it like a jungle. And that phrase, I think, equates to a lot of different hobbies, careers in general, but I think it does really strongly apply with filmmaking and writing in general. So, yeah.
And what's your major again, just to remind me?
Communications and journalism.
Communication and journalism. So I want to hear, I guess, your thoughts on this. Like the way I kind of look at all like the work we do on the side, creative work, with like a business major, let's say, to them like a resume builder might be an internship. And it's not saying comm majors shouldn't get internships, but this kind of is what I look at as resumes. Like, what have you made? What's been your work in the past? Do you kind of see it as that, or not so much?
Yes, I think the fact that someone takes the time to go out and shoot something, to write something and get it published, like for example, the Amherst Wire will allow anyone to essentially come in and just write for them. I think if you go out of your way to really put in work to something, get it published, get it shot or whatnot, then that definitely belongs on a resume. It shows initiative, and you don't have to have an internship with a production company. You don't have to find a paid set job to really get experience. You know, the film industry is, along with I think journalism, is one of the few industries where you can really forge your own path as much as you want. So yeah. Yeah,
I mean, especially I just look at a couple of the people in the industry, like Tarantino, for example. He didn't go to film school. He was working at the video archive store. So he's kind of like the American dream story, I guess, to me.
Yeah. I actually want to go back quickly on what I said. When I said that the film industry is one of those that you can forge your own path in.
Oh, yeah.
It's very difficult to do that. It's very difficult to get into that industry. I don't just mean like anyone
I can't get in the theaters tomorrow.
Yeah. I don't just mean like anyone can just get a job at Warner Brothers, but it's not hard to put in the actual work, you know. So yeah, I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, well,
people are.
I think that that's kind of a good, I guess, transition point too, where we were talking earlier before we started recording about kind of the challenges that the little guys have, the ones who are making movies that kind of challenge people's beliefs or are different than what you see in, let's say, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Could you give your thoughts a little bit on that, or what do you see as the big challenges, I guess?
Absolutely. I just think the big challenge, the big problem in general, is that there's so many franchises that are getting reboots and remakes. Like there's a new Ghostbusters coming out after one just came out 3 years ago that was supposed to be a reboot. There's endless superhero movies. There's endless Star Wars movies. And that's what the public wants, you know. Well, at least that's what a majority of the public wants. You know, there's definitely a solid amount of people that would love to see more visions like Midsummer or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, or I don't know, I can talk about all these random unknown movies, but yeah, there's definitely a small sect of an audience that would love to see those, but it's about making money these days. It's really about turning a profit, and a lot of those movies. But a lot of them do turn profits, but not as much as something like Infinity War or Spider-Man Far From Home. I think the biggest problem is definitely the stigma within the industry that you need to turn a huge profit. And another problem is that with these, something that I actually like that Marvel and DC does is they try to allow independent filmmakers to take on like superhero movies. Like Shazam had a small-time horror director, David Sandberg. Aquaman had James Wan, who did the Conjuring movies. But then there's so much studio meddling. Like the committee gets involved and tries to like shift it so it's really like Disney or Warner Brothers' vision, and it's just, it becomes less and less about what the director wants. That's one of the main problems I see within that industry. And there's tons of examples in that, specifically with the Star Wars movies. I think we could do a completely separate podcast on the production issues Lucasfilm and Disney has encountered.
I mean, I wish I could talk about Star Wars. Hand up, never seen any of them, so I guess I'm the worst and I shouldn't even have a show. But what was I just? What were you were just hitting on? I forget exactly where I was going with that, but I guess one thing we can talk about is Scorsese, because he definitely had a whole piece he wrote up about.
And the fans went crazy.
And I guess I'll start just on this one. I was like, well, my thing with Marvel is I'm never someone like, oh, you can't like that, don't like that. Like, don't just be the contrarian to be the contrarian, but it's also when I look around at the industry, I'm like, and this isn't just Marvel too, like I look at the Fast and the Furious franchise, and I'm like, people, I mean, come on now, like, can we maybe kick that $1 billion budget to the side and get some of the little guys in? That's how I feel about it, but what about you?
Well, with what Scorsese said, I completely agree. You know, Marvel movies are just a carnival ride. You get off and you're done. But that's not to say I still don't like the Marvel movies. Like, I don't want the listeners of your podcast to think I'm some.
And I'm not trying to do that either.
I could definitely sit down and watch a Marvel movie and love it. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy and Captain America: Civil War are definitely some of my favorite movies, period, because they're very well done. But recently, the studio meddling's been a lot more obvious. I think Captain Marvel is an example of that, Avengers Endgame. But the thing about Marvel movies is that they're carefully tailored to a mainstream audience for everyone to enjoy it. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that, but just because of the stranglehold Disney has on the film industry, like, there was a story that came out a few months ago about how Disney was forcing smaller and local theaters to run Star Wars for about 3 to 4 weeks. But a theater, let's take Amherst Cinema for example. If you make Amherst Cinema run Star Wars for 3 or 4 weeks, everyone in the area is going to have seen Star Wars by week 1 or 2. I mean, it's goddamn Star Wars. So then they can't show their other films that make them a very unique theater. Like, they show a lot of art house films that you can't find anywhere in the area. They were showing Color Out of Space for about a week and a half, I think, which wasn't playing. The closest place it was playing was in Connecticut, for God's sake. But yeah, I think the Marvel movies and big franchise movies in general have restructured the film industry to really to really take the favor away from smaller and more personally crafted movies. And that's a real shame, because there's so many good ones out there that just don't get exposure.
Yeah, I actually saw that piece you wrote about, what is it, Amherst Cinema?
Sorry.
The disrespect. And I had never even heard about it. I still haven't checked it out yet. But could you... well, coronavirus. Could you talk a little bit more about that specific cinema? Like, what do they do? What's their goal?
So they're run by a board of directors from a number of different companies, and the place itself is very small. There's I think there's 2 large theaters. I might be wrong on this. Listeners can fact check me. And then there's 1 small theater that has about 30 seats. I love that theater so much. I mean, every movie I've seen in that theater has just been such a great experience. I saw Parasite, The Lighthouse, and I think those are actually the only two movies I've seen in that one specific theater. But it was a very intimate crowd, and everyone who was there to see the movie. You know, it wasn't like when I saw Midsummer over the summer, which was a nightmare of a film going experience. Not because of the movie itself, because of the crowd. But Amherst Cinema also has a lot of other alternative options. They put on documentary shorts. They did like all the Oscar-nominated shorts. They have local films made by like filmmakers from around the area that probably aren't shown in any other theaters. They have directors, actors, animators. They have all these different members of crew coming for Q&A sessions. That's like a majority of the alternative stuff that they offer. But in general, it's just a really nice, really quaint theater that's run with a lot of care, and not enough local theaters are supported that as much, you know. There's a Cinemark about 5 minutes away from Amherst Theater, and Cinemark's a nice theater, don't get me wrong, and they definitely have more of a wide array of mainstream films to show. But, you know, if you're gonna go, my recommendation is that if you want to go see a movie, see if it's playing at Amherst Cinema first.
Shout out Amherst Cinema. We are a pro Amherst Cinema podcast.
For the love of God, support local theaters. It's a dying industry.
Please do it. So when you watch a movie or a film, whatever you want to call it, what do you look for particularly? Because I know some people, when they watch something, they might just kind of passively take it in, I guess. Do you look at like I guess something, since I've taken film classes here, since I've been learning more about movie making, I'll be like, oh, that was a cool shot, like, oh, that was a, whatever you want to call it, a zoom, that was a pullback, that was a this, that, and the other. And also, like, do you try to connect it back to real life, what you see in movies, or no?
Sometimes. When I'm actually watching the movie, I'm rarely thinking about connections to real life, unless it's a very personal movie for me. But in terms of what I actually look for, I'd say there's a few larger aspects of things that I'm paying close attention to, but I almost go through phases in what I really pay attention to. Like right now, my big phase of what I've been paying attention to is editing.
Cool.
Like the flow of scene to scene, how many cuts there are, you know, the context of each scene. And along with that, I really pay attention to cinematography, which is just the way it's shot and the way it looks. The actual writing, like the dialogue that you're hearing, and whether it actually makes sense, because there's plenty of movies with completely awful dialogue. And then the actual narrative structure of the movie. Like, I try not to do this too much because I don't want to like think about what's going to be coming towards the end, but I look at little clues, I try to look for little clues in the background or in the dialogue that might pertain to something that happens later in the movie. Like in Knives Out, there's a number of cues in the dialogue that come up later in the movie. Have you seen Knives Out?
No, but I've heard about that. I heard it was good.
I have problems with it.
Okay. So I'm not seeing it. Fuck that movie.
It's definitely good, and it's good in its own right, but I had problems with it. I don't want to get off topic about Knives Out because I've been complaining about that movie for a while.
Well, I'll just say the reason I asked that was, and I think the reason I feel that way right now is I'm taking a sci-fi film here, and we just watched Her. And listen, obviously, the actual concept I think is ridiculous. Like, dating the computer, creepy. But like, I connect that to real life in the sense of like the Amazon Alexa. You know, like we almost all of us have that in our house, and
Amazon's
thing is just absolutely really. And the thing's just eating up your data, and it's keeping track of you.
I'm never getting one of those.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty jarring when you look into it a little bit.
This podcast is not sponsored by Amazon.
No, we are not an Amazon podcast. Although I do buy off Amazon, I won't lie. Hand up. Thank you for your service, Jeff.
I actually haven't seen Her.
Really?
I have not. No,
really?
I've seen the phone sex scene.
Oh yeah.
I think where she's asking him to meow like a cat or something.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I might be getting that wrong.
Yeah, we were cringing.
But yeah, I haven't seen a lot of Spike Jonze, who I think directed that movie. I haven't seen a lot of his movies. I haven't seen Her though, unfortunately. But I have seen a decent amount of sci-fi. Have you heard of the movie Ex Machina?
I think we're watching that
Alex Garland.
later in
He's
the
a
term.
Sci-fi king. He's done Annihilation and Ex Machina, and then there's something else. I'm not going to sit here and try to remember it, but he's one of the best sci-fi directors in the game right now.
So far, we've seen, I don't know if you've seen any of them, I'll throw them out there. We saw Blade Runner, the 1982 version.
Yeah.
We saw Never Let Me Go. That one was pretty interesting. Oh, we saw Handmaid's Tale, which isn't a...
That's a show.
Isn't a movie,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a show. And that one I thought was very, very interesting and impactful. Have you seen it or no?
I have not, no. I have not. Sci-fi's never really been much of my forte. I like a few sci-fi movies. Like I said, Arrival and Ex Machina and Annihilation. I did like Arrival too. And then I think Contact and Interstellar are the only two other sci-fi movies I've really gotten into. I thought Contact was really good and Interstellar's amazing.
Interstellar's an absolutely iconic one, I feel like. But I guess I want to go back to you. Who would you say are the people you're most inspired by in the industry right now? Who do you kind of look up to?
There's a number of directors that I kind of cycle through in terms of who I'm most inspired by. I think Tarantino is one of the main ones, and that's such a textbook